So I promised to let you know a little bit about Skillfully. We This is the top of our homepage here, and as you can see, we partner with many great financial service firms, and we offer a wide range of courses of all sorts. So go and check them out. I won't run through them now, but because there's lots to talk about with RE5. But you can go and check out Skillfully. Notice it's spelled double L, double L, anytime. And we quite often have these kind of free 1 hour taster sessions, so you can certainly look out for those as well. Now, our RE5 offerings are the ones we are probably proudest of. We offer two versions. This one here is our June version coming up. There you see the dates for the 9th and 10th. This is our live online session where we will teach you a huge amount in over 2 days, starting at 9 o'clock, ending at 5 o'clock. And we are offering a crazy promotion to you guys for coming. It's a 975 Rand course, which you'll notice is better than just about anything on the market. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it at the end. I want to make sure that this doesn't feel like a great big advert. I do honestly want to give you some information, a lot of information about RE5 that you can use for yourself, whether or not you do the course. So there are, I think, a few conditions under which you should perhaps attempt the RE5 exam on your own, and I'll tell you what those conditions are. But we really do want you to climb all these steps to RE5 victory. And so, yeah, let's dive into it. But before we do, actually, let me just see who we have here. I just need to open up my view here and have a look at the chat. And I see, yeah, we've got a whole bunch of people. Wow, look at this. Yannicka from Springbok and Fulufelo from Boksburg, Angela from Alberton, Anne from Pretoria. Sure, Ketumetsu from Gauteng. There are probably quite a lot from Gauteng there. I see Andy, you as well. Sakani too. Robin is from Cape Town and Pretoria. Wow, you've achieved the dream of being in two places at once, Robin. You must teach us how to do that. Nelly from Durban and Matilda. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for participating as well. It's always nice to know that there really are people out there when you are presenting these sorts of sessions. So let's jump into the RE5 exam. And the first question, I suppose, is why would you do it? Right? Why would you put yourself through this crazy thing? Well, one reason is if you're a supervised rep, you need to do it, right? If you're a supervised rep, you know about this. You've got something called your DOFA, which is, it sounds like something Homer Simpson would say, but it actually stands for your date of first appointment. And during that time, you're going to have to find, during the next 6 years or so after your date of first appointment, you have to get the experience. You have to do your class of business training. You need to obtain your qualification if you haven't already. And then most importantly, and most relevant to today, you have to pass the RE5 exam. So that's why you would be here and contemplating writing this done RE5 exam if you are a supervised rep. But maybe you're not a supervised rep because there are lots of people who aren't supervised reps who do the RE5 exam. And that's because generally they want to find work in the financial services sector. And this is a fantastic way to do that because it tells an employer, hey, this person has what it takes. And by the way, they've already got their RE5. So you, Mr. or Mrs. Employer, don't have to worry about whether they can pass or fail this thing while they're working for you because they've got it in the bag already. So that's a lovely thing to put on your CV and can really help you find employment. All right. So what are these 7 steps to RE5 victory? Well, I've written them here. I'm not going to read through them because I'm going to be going through them in detail. So let's jump straight into the first one, becoming familiar with the role players, right? I like to call them the main characters. So let me introduce you to them. And let me tell you right up front, one of the things we like to do. Well, let me tell you why first. It's very important you get the different characters straight in your head, right? So when you're sitting in the exam, you can get asked a question about, say, a product supplier, and it's very easy to kind of read that term, product supplier, and think of an FSP, But actually, product suppliers and FSPs are completely different entities. And if you misinterpret the question that way, you're almost bound to get it wrong. So it's really important to get everything separate in your head and also to see the big picture, to really understand what's going on. One of the things we really try to achieve with our students is to get them to understand the big picture, know why the legislation says what it does, actually understand the various terms involved. And so part of that is understanding these main characters, as I said. So at Skillfully, what we do is we actually give them a proudly South African animal. And that we use throughout the course to represent each of these different characters. And that is very helpful to our students to kind of figure out, to keep them separate in their head and to make sure they see that big picture. So a client we represent with a honey badger. A honey badger wants honey like a client wants a financial product. Okay? Who makes financial products? Well, product suppliers, just the same way that beehives make the honey, right? So there you have already, you introduced to two characters there and the financial product that the client wants, that the product supplier issues. Here are some examples of product suppliers. This is another thing we think is important in preparing for the RE5 exam, is to see some examples so that this stuff becomes real, because it's very easy to look at the legislation and just think, yo, I don't even know what this means, let alone how it plays out in the real world. So here are some examples. You've got two insurers there that you'll recognize, Old Mutual and Outsurance. No doubt you've heard of both of them. They have life insurance companies, both of them, but they also, if you look up here, they have non-life as well, entities as well. They sell insurance that's not life insurance, other kinds of insurance. And then you've got a bunch of other insurers on this list that probably you haven't heard of. To be honest, I don't think I've come across Orange Insurance or Peregrine Life. But nevertheless, these are examples that come in all sizes, big and small, of some product suppliers. And these are just the insurers, of course. There's all sorts of other product suppliers making other kinds of financial products. So a client wants the honey that the product supplier produces, and it is possible for that badger to go straight to the source, to climb the tree and pull the honey out. So the clients in the real world of financial services can go off to the product supplier, to Old Mutual, and say, hey, listen, I want to take out life insurance with you. But often it doesn't work out that way. Often the client wants help. And the help is provided by a go-between. What's the fancy word for that is an intermediary, right? Somebody who sits between the client and the product supplier and helps the client with obtaining these products, with deciding which products to get. And that is called a financial services provider, or an FSP. They render financial services to clients for a particular set of financial products. That's the definition. Okay, now you can see the way I've represented that financial services provider is as a BOMA with 4 different kinds of characters inside it, because if you want to pass the RE5 exam, you need to understand these 4 characters that work within an FSP. Before we get there, let me show you a couple of examples. These are different kind of categories of FSPs, and at some point, if you don't already, you'll learn what those categories are. But let me just give you a taste of them. There's Standard Bank that we've all heard of. You've probably heard of Alan Gray, a famous asset manager in South Africa. And Timberco, perhaps you've heard of. That's a word you hear every now and then when you work in financial services. They are what's called an administrator. Aon Investments. Gee, I'll be impressed if anyone on the call has heard of Aon, because to be honest, I hadn't heard of it until I started looking for an example of a hedge fund. That is a hedge fund FSP. And then right in the top there, you've got Nosipho Baba. She is a natural person. She has registered herself as an FSP. She actually has only one animal in her BOMA, and that is she herself, right? Just the lion. She would be a lion because she would be what's called a key individual. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me show you these 4 different characters that, except for the Monica Klabas of the world, if you're big enough, then you've probably, the FSP is going to have all of these 4 characters. So let's meet one of them. And actually, the first I'd like you to meet, the hero of the RE5 story, as far as we're concerned at Skillfully, is the meerkat, because the meerkat represents a representative, right? And many of our students on our courses are either, as I said before, supervised representatives, or they are looking to become supervised representatives. So that's why they are heroes. They are either employed by the FSP or they are mandated by the FSP. That means that they have been given a written mandate to provide financial services under the FSP's name, even though they aren't employed. Then let's meet the next individual. I said earlier, if you've got just one person in an FSP like Monica, well, she'll be a lion, because the lion is the key individual who manages or oversees the financial activities of an FSP. In a big FSP like this, you get a few key individuals who are effectively managing or overseeing the work of the reps. Then, who is this cheetah here? Well, that's our supervisor. And those of you who are supervised reps, you'll know who your supervisor is. And they are there to look after you, to shepherd you through the process of becoming a fully fledged rep, to meet with you and guide you and coach you and so on. And then the last animal in there is the one with the long neck that looks down over everything and can see everything going on in the FSP. And so that's why we've used the giraffe to represent the compliance officer, who is ensuring that the FSP complies with all the financial legislation. Okay, so there you have it. That's what most FSPs look like. Of course, most FSPs will have lots of meerkats scurrying around and just a few lions and a cheetah for every supervised meerkat and a few compliance officers, perhaps. There are authorities over these people. And those authorities we represent with birds. There's the ombud, who has to be a wise owl because they independently handle complaints from the FSP's clients. There is the secretary bird, the FIC, the Financial Intelligence Center, who combats money laundering and also the financing of terrorist activities. You've probably heard of FICA, that's the Financial Intelligence Center Act, and FSPs have to send them a huge amount of paperwork and keep a whole bunch of paperwork within the FSP in case the FIC ever wants to come visiting and get a record of transactions. And so that's why we use, because it's all about paperwork as far as the FSP is concerned, that's why we use that secretary bird to represent the FIC. And then finally, and most importantly, there is the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, this fish eagle that flies high above it all and scrutinizes the entire industry and swoops down whenever there is an issue that of non-compliance or something that they are concerned about. They regulate the conduct of all of these characters I've introduced you to, the FSP and the rep and the KI and the compliance officer and the product suppliers too. So now you can see, I was saying earlier, you have to be able to see the big picture. Well, here is the big picture, literally, right? The world of financial services is clients looking to buy honey from product suppliers, but using this intermediary, the FSP, which is made up of reps and key individuals and perhaps some supervisors and certainly some compliance officers. And up in the sky above them, they are being monitored by the Ombud, by the Financial Intelligence Center, and especially in the middle of it all, the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. The RE5 exam, so many of those questions are going to be asking you about the role of one or more of these characters. So you have to see that big picture. Hopefully you've got it now. Okay, so I'm going to give that one a tick. Then let's move on to understanding what the exam actually tests. So there's that big picture again. That world of financial services is governed by legislation. And if you're an RE5 candidate, there are 18 pieces of legislation that you need to know about. They are appearing on your screen right now. And this is perhaps where you start to get the idea of why the RE5 exam is not easy, right? You've done a good thing by coming here today because you should be taking all the help you can get. Each one of these has examinable sections to it. One of them that is going to come up the most in your RE5 exam is the very first one there, FAIS, the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act. Now, I'm just going to give you a little taste of what that legislation contains, because it will give you a good sense of why it's so important. So firstly, if you see this area I'm drawing here, that is all of the characters that are regulated by the Financial Advisory and Intermediary Services Act. Here are some of the things that it lays out. The kinds of financial services and financial products that can be offered, how an FSP's license is obtained and how it maintains its license, and how that license can be suspended or withdrawn by the Fish Eagle, by the FSCA. There are various duties of the FSPs that are outlined in that FAIS Act, especially ones that deal with clients. There are laws about how the FSPs must debar representatives, something I hope never happens to any of you. If you're a compliance officer or the compliance officer, or you want to be one, well, the role and function that you play at the FSP is mandated by the FAIS Act. And the role and the authority of the Ombud is also clearly defined in the FAIS Act. There's more. There's much, much more. You can see here there's more in the FAIS Act, and you can see that there's more about the Ombud. That very last one is more about the Ombud. There is stuff about all of these characters dotted throughout this legislation. And so it's these 18 pieces of legislation that you need to know for the RE5 exam. That is what the exam is about. If you weren't sure what it's about those 18 pieces of legislation. All right, so I'm going to give that a tick, because that is a fairly simple point, but a really important point to start off with. And then, I think it would be nice just to get a little bit more input from you guys. There are a lot of people in this call. Not everybody typed into the chat there, but let's see if I can coax some more of you out here, because we do like engagement at Skillfully with all of our courses. So I'm going to launch a little question for you here. It should be appearing on your screens right now. Do you feel familiar with the role players in the world of financial services, and do you understand that the RE exam tests the legislation? What's your answer? Yebo? Kinda? No way. I see some answers coming in now. That's good. You can't see the answers, but I will show them to you when I've got enough in here. Thank you. I see some of you who've got your videos on. I can see you battling away with a phone screen there to choose the correct answer. It should be working for you. I hope it does. Okay, well, thank you for participating, everybody. And let me now end this poll and share the results. And you should be able to see that the majority of you feel, yes, you've got it. Okay, at least you understand who are these role players and what the RE5 actually tests. And some of you are a little bit more cautious, probably for very good reason. There's more to say about all of the stuff I've said so far. But I'm glad to see that nobody's saying, no way, you've lost me on slide 1. Okay, so let's get back to it. And let me just make sure that everything's showing up. Yep. So we're going to move on to knowing about the tasks and the QCs. So some of you will have already looked into this and you've heard of tasks and QCs. Some of you will be saying, I don't know anything about that. Well, this is my opportunity to try to make it a little bit clearer for those of you who've heard of them, and to and maybe to scare the people who haven't heard of them. I don't want to scare you, but I do want to give you a sense of how complex it is to try to prepare for the RE5 on your own, and what you're in for if you've decided you are going to do that. So how do the examiners divide up the RE5 curriculum? Well, the answer is it's complicated. And so firstly, they take these 18 pieces of legislation that I showed you before, and they arrange them into 8 tasks. And then they, within each task, identify a bunch of qualifying criteria. You might call them QCs. And then each QC lists a bunch of legislation that you need to know for the exam. Okay. That might start to become clear to you, but I'm going to just take 5 minutes to try to make it a bit clearer. Okay, so just for the moment, know that there are tasks, there's qualifying criteria, and there are legislation references. In fact, here is the full curriculum, just without the details, of the RE5 exam. You can see the 8 tasks in the first column here. You can see the name of each of them. You can see how many qualifying criteria they have. Okay, so it differs a lot, right? Task 1 has only 1 qualifying criterion, whereas task 4 has 14. And then you can see how many legislation references there are in total for the task. And what I'm going to do is just focus on number 1 here. That's got 4 QCs and in total 21 legislation references, right? In order that you should be able to demonstrate understanding of the FASE Act as a regulatory framework. Okay, what does that mean? Well, let me try to show you, dig down into this and show you the qualifying criteria, right? So we're zoomed in on task 1 now. There it is. Here are the 4 qualifying criteria. Here are the 21 pieces of legislation. Some of them belong to QC1, some to 2, 3, 4, and so on. If we look down at 4, there are 10 pieces of legislation. 4 in 17, 2 in section 18 of the FASE Act, 3 in the FASE regulations, and 1 in the General Code of Conduct. All of those are supposed to help you describe the role and function of a compliance officer. Okay? Now, let me try to illustrate this for you. There's the FASE Act, and those are the 4 extracts from section 17, and here are the 2 extracts from section 18, and there's the FASE regulations. Here are the 3 regulation 5s, the extracts from regulation 5, and there's the General Code of Conduct, and that's section 3. Now, what you are being asked to do is to understand all of that, because it all forms part of qualifying criterion 4. Don't forget, there's also qualifying criteria 1, 2, and 3 in task 1. And if we zoom back out, there's task 1 with the 4 qualifying criteria and those 3 pieces of legislation with different sections. But there's going to be more sections for those other qualifying criteria. There are actually other pieces of legislation that go into this other qualifying criteria. Then don't forget, there's 7 more tasks. They each have a different number of QCs. There's in total 18 pieces of legislation. And wait for it, here's the really messy bit. Each piece of legislation is going to belong to at least 1 and quite often many qualifying criteria. Okay, so now I told you I'd scare you a little bit. As I say, I don't mean to, but I want to be realistic. If you try to approach this topic in terms of tasks and QCs and then pieces of legislation, it's messy. It really is. So you might not know the tasks and QCs at this point, but you know about them. So let's tick off step 3 and let's move on to step 4, which is to try reading the legislation. Okay, so let's just say we wanted to understand one thing by looking at the legislation, right? Just one thing. Let's just get a taste of the legislation. And let's say that we want to understand the definition of financial services. I mean, that's an important thing, right? Those are the first 2 words in FSP, and it's what an FSP does for its clients. It provides financial services. We saw that earlier. So let's try now to figure out what the legislation tells us. I mean, there must be a nice, neat definition somewhere, right? So let's go and have a look. I'm hoping, there we go, that what I'm showing you right now is a page from Skillfully's website. You can see here our logo and whatnot. And this is a nice page. It's on our blog. You can just get there by going to news. And then it's always one of the ones near the top. It's called examinable material for RE5. And you're welcome. We've got all 18 pieces of legislation. They're free for anybody to check out and use. And we're going to start by looking at the phase advisory and intermediary services. And here's the act. We have put in hyperlinks so you can jump between things. So let's go and check out the definitions, because we think there should be a nice, neat definition of financial services. So yeah, there we go. And there is one. Brilliant. This is going to be easy. So financial service means any service contemplated in paragraph A, B, or C of the definition of financial services provider, including any category of such services. Okay. Well, maybe it's not as simple as I thought, because now we have to look at the definition of financial services provider and at paragraphs A, B, and C, because that's what a financial service is. So, all right, here it is. It's right there. FSP means any person other than a rep who has a regular feature of the business of such person furnishes advice and renders any intermediary service or renders an intermediary service. Okay, I get the point. It's either advice or it's intermediary services or it's both. Okay. But now what's advice? Oh dear, the rabbit hole is going to go a bit deeper. Let's go and check out advice. There we go. Look at this. Advice. Oh, well, that's quite long. There's a whole bunch here. A, B, C, D. D has 1 and 2 parts. You have to get good at reading Roman numerals, by the way. If you do RE5, that's a Roman numeral 1, that's Roman numeral 2. And there's also intermediary services. But before we go check out the definition of intermediary services, let's just notice here that subsection 3A, there's like a mention of that in the definition of advice. So we can go and check out intermediary services definition. Hopefully that's shorter than advice. Oh, I've gone past it. There it is. Oof, it's not really any shorter than advice. It's basically the same length. And look at that. It even goes up to Roman numeral 3. It also mentions subsection 3. So let's go and check out subsection 3. It's down here somewhere. Here it is. Oh my goodness. Now there's a whole bunch more here. Oops, sorry, I've gone too far. There's 3. There's subsection 3. Advice doesn't mean these things. Oh, and it does. The intermediary services don't include these things. Yeah. And then I'll be honest, I don't know if you're picking up here. I've done this before. I knew it wasn't going to be so simple. I can tell you there's even more. You see that there's also a guidance note on intermediary services and representatives. If you open up that guidance note, this is a whole long thing about financial services, intermediary services, advice, and then a whole bunch of extra detail. Look at this specific guidance for what it means to offer intermediary services when you're furniture or motor car dealer, and so on. Okay, so that's probably enough of the pain and the torture. Let me just recap what we've done here together. We set out to answer a relatively simple question by looking at the legislation. Hey, what are these financial services that you keep talking about? And what did we do? We started with the Phase Act. We looked at Section 1 definitions. We had to look at the definition of financial services, but then that sent us to the definition of an FSP, which then took us to the definition of advice and the definition of intermediary services. We had to then check Section 3 because of the things that aren't advice and aren't intermediary services. And on top of it all, we had to go and check the guidance note, which had even more in it. All right. Tried to make 2 points here. The tasks, the QCs, the legislation, it's all very messy. And looking at the legislation itself is long and complicated. In fact, to sum it up, the legislation's in disconnected sections. It's missing real world context. So when you read that stuff, it's hard to understand what it really means for real people. Very long and wordy. It's written in this foreign language called legalese, because when we didn't spend a lot of time actually trying to read it, but if you maybe did while I was sharing it on my screen, you probably would have seen it's very hard to understand. You have to kind of translate it into English before you can get it right. It's incredibly detailed. It's something you picked up a little bit there. Section 3's got these exclusions of the definition, and that's typical of the legislation. There are these like tricky exceptions that then get thrown in some other section. It's prone to becoming outdated. That's another thing you have to worry about a bit. Is like if you go, we keep our legislation fully up to date on Skillfully. But if you're using other sources, you might be looking at an act that's been updated, but you're looking at the old version, and it's hard to remember. It really is. What you need is something that's digestible and understandable, up to date and memorable, right? Whether you're going to take our course or do it yourself or take someone else's course, you need to start from something that is digestible, understandable, up to date and memorable. All right. We've tried reading the legislation. Let's do another poll. I enjoyed how you guys joined me in that last poll. Love to see even more people join because I'm pretty sure not everybody answered. So let's see. Somewhere along here, I should be able to find my polls. There we go. And I'm going to give you this one. Now that you know how the tasks in QCs are arranged and you've tried reading some legislation, how do you feel? I'm getting quite a lot of mixed responses here. Perhaps some of you have a problem responding. Don't worry about it. It's obviously not the end of the world if you can't respond, but it is lovely if you can. Let me end the poll and share the results with you. I see we've got a majority of people who are saying they're quite nervous. They're not sure how to proceed. And that, I think, is probably exactly what I would have answered if I was sitting in your seat right now. Yeah, it is. It is a nervous proposition, trying to look at those tasks and those QCs and the legislation. And, you know, I think maybe my answer, if I'm really honest, would be somewhere between that one. And I'm freaking terrified as I see 24% of you answered. There's another 24% who are just so impressive. Man, I don't know how you could answer, I'm chill, this will be easy. Those people I obviously didn't scare enough, but that's okay. I'm not in the business of scaring. I'm in the business of helping people learn. So if you feel like this is going to be easy, well, that's great. So let's get back to my slides. And here's what I have to say to those of you who do want to do this on your own. If you are brave enough, despite how freaking terrified you might feel or nervous or whatever it might be, I'd suggest there are 3 conditions in which you should contemplate doing this on your own. One is if you have loads of time, and then you can create the resources you need by yourself. But you need to have a lot of time. I know how long it's taken Skillfully to put our resources together. Believe me, it would take a lot of time. Then you need to actually be quite fond of reading legislation, which would put you in a pretty unusual camp. There are not too many people who feel that way, but yeah, that's another thing that would need to be true. And then another thing is if affordability is a roadblock for you. We try to make our prices as affordable as possible. But of course, we understand that there are people who can't even afford those. So those are the 3 conditions where I think doing this on your own makes some sense. But otherwise, I really recommend you take one of our courses, right? And I'm not going to try to do a huge sales pitch on you. It's just that we honestly believe that it is actually the cheapest and the fastest way to actually pass the RE5 exam. The RE5 exam, by the way, costs money that you don't pay to Skillfully, that you have to pay to Moonstone, who administers the exam. And it costs at the moment $1,300. We charge less than that for our courses. So if you take a course with us and it improves your chances of passing, then it improves your chances of saving $1,300, because most people fail the RE5 exam the first time they write it, and that's 1,300 Rand wasted. So that's why we can say very genuinely that we do think it's in everybody's interest to take one of our courses. Now, what I'd like to do, this is not going to be a sales pitch for the next 20 minutes before we end. What I want to try to show you, whether you're going to try to do this on your own or not, is how we approach trying to make it easier for people. So this is what you would do if you were trying to do it on your own as well. And these are the last 3 steps. So we do what we just said we need to do, which is to make that legislation digestible and understandable and memorable. So how do we do that? Well, remember that diagram with the tasks and the QCs and the arrows going everywhere to all of these 18 pieces of legislation? We've gone and we've looked at all of that. And what we've done is we've arranged all of that material into topics. Now, these are our 17 lessons. Number 1 is on the main characters. It's more of the same stuff that I started today's session with. Number 2 is on the products and the services and the legislation. Number 3 is on how an FSP obtains its license. Number 4 is on losing that license. Number 5 is about giving clients info and so on. What we have effectively done, remember this picture here? Well, actually, this was a picture much like the one you saw earlier, but this is the one on debarment. We've taken all of that complicated stuff and we have put it in one lesson where you can learn everything from each one of these 8 pieces of legislation and these 6 QCs and these 2 tasks, at least as far as they talk about debarment, in one lesson on debarment. That's the way to approach understanding things. Then we make a big effort to make the legislation meaningful. You've already seen that one of the things we do is we use these images of the characters. So you'll remember, I hope, that the meerkat is a rep. If you took the course with us, you would certainly remember that because you see the rep on almost every second slide. And you know that the FSP is represented with a BOMA. So now this is an image of debarment that can kind of stick in your mind because that meerkat has been locked out of his BOMA. It's a rep that has been told they can't work for this FSP anymore. That's what debarment is. And then what we do to also help make the legislation meaningful, we don't just draw pictures, but we actually show people the real examples. Here is an example of a debarment order from the FSCA that you get to look at in our courses and get to understand, okay, I really get what's going on here. That it's the FSCA who issues the debarment order, that it's for a period of time, what it actually kind of says. And then another way in which we show real world stuff to make this stuff meaningful is we'll show, for example, this debarment notification form, which the FSP sends to the FSCA. So the FSCA knows that the FSP has debarred the rep. And as our delegates are looking at this form, this is consolidating for them that, okay, it's the FSP that actually does the debarment, even though it's the FSCA that issues the debarment order. And then there is the person at the FSP who actually needs to take responsibility for this thing. And so their name needs to go on this form. There's a section 5, which actually asks you to tick the reasons for why there's a debarment, which is, again, consolidating for our delegates why you might get debarred. It's either because you have not complied with the fit and proper requirements, which, by the way, are these ones, and looking at this form will also help people understand and remember what the fit and proper requirements are, or the other reason is because of some other material contravention or non-compliance of the provisions of the Act. Finally, there's a section 7 which reminds FSPs and therefore also makes it real for our delegates that within 15 days from the date of debarment, the FSP has to send a whole bunch more information, right? So I hope you can get the point that by looking at these kind of real world documents, which aren't technically on the exam, you get a much clearer understanding of what the examinable material really means. And therefore, you're much better able to answer the questions in the exam. We also summarize the legislation and translate it into English. So, we were looking earlier at the definition of financial services. Here are our 3 slides that take all of that complicated journey, that all the steps down through section 1 and section 3 and the guidance notice and all that stuff, and we put it in one place, and we try to make it visual and appealing. We use color and all that sort of thing to try to make this stuff more understandable and more memorable. Then we like to identify recurring themes, because there's often there are a bunch of themes that recur throughout all of this legislation. And if you learn to identify and recognize those themes as patterns, it actually helps you answer questions even if you don't know the detail. And I want to demonstrate that for you here. So here is one of the recurring themes that comes up a whole lot. The legislation aims to protect clients. Okay, that is probably its top priority. Although it doesn't demand that FSPs do beyond what's reasonable. So you have to protect clients, but not beyond what's reasonable. That is a recurring theme. Now, I said, if you understand recurring themes, you can answer questions on the RE exam, even if you don't know the detail. Let me prove that to you here. Let's say this recurring theme is what you know. And then you get this question in the exam. When giving the client information, which of the following is a rep required to do? Are they meant to prioritize the interests of the FSP? Are they meant to emphasize the maximum financial return that the client might earn from the relevant products? Are they meant to describe the fees in monetary terms, or if not possible, describe the basis of calculation? Or are they meant to repeat the information in a weekly communication to serve as regular confirmation whether or not the information has changed? Now, if you know that recurring theme, you should be able to get the answer right. Why? Well, look at A. You can't protect the interests of clients if you're prioritizing the interests of the FSP. So A can't be the right answer. And similarly, we know that if a rep or an FSP were to emphasize the maximum financial returns that a client might earn, then they may well jump into investing in risky products. What a rep should really be telling is what the general expectation is. What's the likely outcome? And warning clients about the worst possible case, right? What's the worst case scenario? Emphasizing the maximum financial return is not going to protect clients. So we can eliminate both of those answer options, even though we might not have seen this detail before, just by thinking about that recurring theme. And we can do the same thing for answer option D here, because repeating the information in a weekly communication to serve as a regular confirmation, even if the information hasn't changed, that's surely going beyond what's reasonable. I mean, surely the legislation can't ask the FSPs to do that. They'd never do anything else. They'd just be sending weekly communication to clients all the time. And so that leaves only option C, even if you've never heard of this requirement to describe fees in monetary terms or the basis of the calculation. You know it's the right answer because you've eliminated the other ones, because the one thing you did know was the recurring theme. I hope that helps you and also inspires you to feel less fearful, right? There are ways to hack this exam. You do need to know a lot of material, but there are also ways that you can answer questions and get them right, even if you don't know 100%. Nobody really goes in there knowing 100%. So you want to know about some of these hacks. While there are recurring themes, there are also exceptions to those themes. And so we make sure we highlight them. This is from our slides on being fit and proper. That is a meerkat who is extremely fit and proper. I've never seen a meerkat with an 8-pack before. But you'll notice that at the bottom of that slide, there is this attention drawn to the exception about category 1 reps and 2 particular types of category 1 reps who don't have to do CPD as part of the fit and proper requirements. And then another thing we do, and that we'd encourage you to do, even if you were doing it with somebody else or on your own, is to use things like that table in the top right-hand corner, which shows a nice summary of how an FSP gets its status as an FSP or might lose its status, and the same thing for a rep and a key individual and a compliance officer. The one down at the bottom right will remind you a little bit, I think, of that slide I showed you right at the beginning when I was answering that question. Why would you want to write the RE5 exam? Because that is the full timeline I showed you part of earlier, which we like to use to summarize. We use a lot of timelines in our courses because it summarizes a lot of the information very neatly and memorably. And then, as I mentioned before, we also use a lot of images to conjure up what this stuff means and helps people remember the stuff. So we know that this is how we achieve the objective. We take this legislation, which has got all of those problems I mentioned earlier, and we turn it into something which is arranged by topic, has real world context, which is concise, and it is in plain English, and it's focused on broad principles with the exceptions clearly noted, and it's up to date, and it has lots of aids to the memory so that you maximize the chance that you actually remember the material as you work through it. So that's how we achieve step 5. Then, very important, you have to also be good at answering the questions, right? You have to develop your exam technique. We think it's kind of 60 to 70% knowing the material, and it's 30 or 40% knowing how to answer the questions. So there's a bunch of ways to do that. And one of the ways we do that is we give our students lots and lots of questions. So actually, at the end of every lesson, we do questions like this one here. I said times 90 because we actually, if you do a course with us, you'll end up doing 90 questions during the course with us. As you learn each of the material, each section of the material, you get asked questions about that particular material. And then we give advice about how to answer questions. We spend time talking about how to approach different questions and give a bunch of general exam strategy advice too. So that's about developing your exam technique. I didn't spend very long on that, but it does take you quite a long time to work through all of that stuff, right? It's just easy for me to explain, so I'm not going to waste your time going on about it right now. And then finally, step 7, you'll need to revise and practice. So how do our students revise and practice? Well, they have got access to our entire ebook of slides and further study material. You can see here an extract of lesson 8. It's got all of our slides in it. It also has got some notes in it. I wonder if I can just quickly show you that bookshelf resource. I'm just going to check if I'm logged in right now. There we go. It's loading. So here we go. This is the lesson 8 slides here. And you'll see every now and then we've got some extra information that helps you to with a little extra stuff that didn't come up in the slides. And if you want to add notes, you can add notes as well. So that's a lovely feature, is you're able to add notes, as you can see here. All right, let's get back to our slides. We also ask you to practice the relevant questions at the end of every topic that we mentioned before. You get to do them over and over again after the course is over. And then you also get all of those summaries that you can potentially learn from as you are approaching exam day. Nice, concise ways to cover a lot of material and hopefully, be able to answer a lot of questions just with having learned from a few different sources. And then very, very importantly, to do some mock exams. So we provide 2 full mock exams to our students with questions that we have worked on very carefully. Something, by the way, that we're aware of is that there are a lot of exam questions floating out there. They call them exam questions, but of course, none of the providers' questions actually are exam questions because they don't come from the actual exam. Those are kept secret. But they have often not been put together by people who really understand the material. So don't let yourself get thrown off because you go onto YouTube and you see a bunch of questions and you think, oh my goodness, they're going to ask me about that. It's not reliable, right? You have to make sure that you are looking at a reliable provider's set of questions if you want to get a sense of what sort of questions you might actually be asked. So that's revise and practice. So how do you climb these stairs? Let's start at the bottom. I hope that I've got you this far already today, right? You've done steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm hoping that you will come and join us for steps 5, 6, and 7. How can you join us? Well, I showed you earlier that we have got a live online course starting on the 9th and 10th of June. We're giving this huge half price discount of 975 Rand. So that's what it'll cost you, 975 bucks, including VAT. If you want to join us, just email us at admin@skillfully.coza or WhatsApp us on that line there. That price is not going to last for very long. Nicole is going to send you an email tomorrow. I think it'll be tomorrow. That will tell you how long you have to sign up for this course. But I also want to tell you something very exciting, because in the next few days, I'm hoping tomorrow, we are going to be launching. Oh, I forgot. Before I make my big announcement, let me just point out what I said to you earlier, that actually 975 bucks is way less than paying for the exam a second time, which is why, as I said before, we think really it is in everybody's interest to do our courses. Speaking of that, let me get back to our big announcement. We are very, very excited to be launching our first Anytime Online course for RE5. And what do I mean there? I'm talking about something that you can do in your own time, flexibly, because it has 18 recorded video lessons, right? It adds up to 6.5 hours. There's 17 videos on each of the legislation lessons and a whole video on exam techniques and strategy. There are 17 knowledge checks, which are where we give you those 90 questions that are based on each of the video lessons you've just done. You pass them in order to progress to the next lesson. So you kind of get held to account. You get forced to make sure that you really are learning as you work through the material. We provide those 2 mock exams to you, as I mentioned earlier. We also, excitingly, have a chatbot that will answer your questions about the RE5 material. And we provide all of that stuff that I showed you just now on Bookshelf. It's got more than what I showed you. In fact, I don't know why I didn't show you more. Because not just does it have the slides and the further notes, but it also has kind of helpful extra stuff at the end, a glossary, a list of the time periods that you need to remember, and so on. Now, we have been working for months on putting together this asynchronous course, and we're finally there. We've just got a couple of little pieces to fix in terms of some of the flow through the course, but it's going to take probably another 24 hours, and then it will launch. And here's the really exciting thing for you. When we launch it, we're going to launch it at a ridiculously low price, because what we want is people to come on and do it and let us know if there's something that's not quite working for them. And so we are willing to give it away almost for free, right? We'll charge 575 Rand. This is going to be a very limited first adopter discount. Nicole will send you the details about it. She will show you, she will give you links. In fact, we'll even give you a link to a sample course that you can try for free so that you get a sense of whether this is really as good as I'm suggesting it is. And then if you like what you see in the sample course, you can go over and register, pay the 575 and come on board and do this Anytime Online course in your own time, flexibly, whenever it suits you, over the period that you actually have to work. You don't have to take time off work. So we're hopeful that a lot of people, this is really going to suit and get you over that line and get you to pass RE5 first time. So I've got one last little poll as the minutes wind down to 11 o'clock. And so let me put that up for you. And really, it is just asking you to let us know whether you're interested in either of these courses. The live online course is the one on the 9th and 10th, where you'll be sitting with me and Greg for 2 days, and we'll be talking you through the material. The Anytime Online, well, that's the one I just showed you with the recorded video lessons, where you can do it flexibly in your own time. It'd be lovely to just get a sense from you guys of what your level of interest is in these things. The 9th and 10th of June one, that is a bit more money, and that's because it's got, you know, live people, me and Dr. Greg Fried that I mentioned earlier, who will be presenting it. And I see some answers come through. Thank you very much. And actually, I'm going to leave this poll open in case anybody else wants to answer it. So I'm not going to share the results with you. That's not because I'm hiding them from you. I see that 69% have said they're keen on Anytime Online, and the other 31% said they're keen on live online. That's great. You will get communications from Nicole in the next couple of days with more information about all of this and how you can book them.